Greetings, fellow incarnators. Happy Friday. As usual, we're kicking it off the weekend with a little live stream. Today we're doing part 7 of our Parchment World map series. And today we're going to be wrapping up our biomes with the plains biomes. And I can't stress to you actually how important plains biomes actually are. People might think, well, they're rather plain, and that would be understandable, right? Because what is a plain except for just kind of a flat surface? It doesn't have a lot of changes in elevation, so it's rather plain. It's geography joke. But they are actually super important. They play a huge role in the ecology and the geography, and honestly, they play an artistic role as well. I find them super important. We're going to be covering both natural biomes, like or natural plains, like an outwash, alluvial, scroll, lacustrine, all these different types. So we'll be covering that. So grasslands are super important. And then also they play an artistic role as well. First, let's just kind of go over what type there is. We'll start with the natural ones first. Or let me first, actually, we'll start with the definition of a plain just to kind of get that out of the way. So we'll start with that. First one is that in geography, a plain is a flat area with little or very little elevation change whatsoever. So relatively flat. It's a major landform, and they can be found all over the place at the foot of mountains, coastlines, at the bottom of valleys, or they can rest on top of the upper surface of a plateau. So they can be in a lot of different places, and they're going to be super important for the species or the races of your world because they're very densely populated places, and that's because of the relative ease of transport that your species are going to encounter in those areas. And also they're super important because they great for agriculture. So another reasons why they're very densely populated. And because without major mountains or land formations blocking the sun, you get this optimal amount of sunlight. And so they're great for crops. So a lot of your civilizations, a lot of your races and species, you're going to find a lot of them are going to be deposited in your plains areas. Just kind of remember that. So great places to have those. So let's go ahead and go to that first one, which is called an outwash plain. Let me go ahead and zoom into it. You can see it right here, an outwash plain. They're also sometimes referred to as a Sandur as well. And I personally like the name Outwash and Sandur. You can come up with some cool names like a Verdant Sandur or the Zelawari Outwash. These are cool words, and so you can come up with some really nice names with that. Now, an outwash plain is formed by glacier deposits that deposit sediments at its terminus, what's sometimes referred to its foot or the snout. Terminus is like the base of the glacier, right? As that glacier moves, it erodes all this bedrock and it carries this eroded sediments downstream, right? And then it's deposited by meltwater at the base of that mountain. Again, sometimes called the terminus or snout. So an outwash plain is formed or is carved out by glacier. And so what we want to do is maybe throw in first a good location to put that would be in the higher locations up here where your snow or your frigid region is. So that's a good place to have it. So we'll put that outwash there. I'm going to put it right in this region right here. And what generally kind of helps is I want to create this illusion that there's still some of these glaciers left. So I'm going to use these jagged rocks right here. I'm going to bring the scale down. I'm going to place them right along in here. So I'll place one here. Let's actually, let's see. Let's do, this one might look good here. What I want them to do is kind of be jutting out towards the ocean. And it also can frame this plane a little bit, which I think might look nice. So we'll go ahead and let's put that one there so it kind of overlaps. And then this is a smaller one. Let's have that one right there. So it looks like it kind of overlaps. One there. And then let's add one more right there. And then maybe some smaller ones. It's always good to have a variation. Whenever you're putting some kind of land formations, it could be cliffs, it could be mountains, hills, whatever it might be, you want a nice variety of sizes because that's going to look more natural than all the mountains and all the hills being exactly the same size. So it's helpful to kind of have this variation. So I'm going to have these kind of glaciers right here. And then what I'll do is I want to take some of that snow that I used. I think let's put this one right here, snow. I'm going to bring the opacity down and I'm going to have it kind of look like it's kind of fading inward into this plain area right here. So just a little bit like this, kind of fading inward like this. think that'll look good. All right, and then I want to show some grass as well. And so a great one to use is this grass alpha texture. This is perfect. You might have to change the scale a little bit, but you can kind of see it in the preview. And I use this grass texture on almost every single plane that I create, because what planes have a lot of are grass. Obviously not every plane, there's various types. There's an underwater plane called an abyssal plane. There's also a fire plane as well. So not all of them, but one of the major type of vegetation you find there is grass. And so what I'll do is I'll take that grass texture and just apply it. And what's great about it is it's an alpha texture, meaning that it's going to pick up whatever texture is underneath of it. It supports transparency. And so that means it won't interrupt whatever textures are underneath of it. And this is a texture that I use, again, for almost every single plane. You're going to find it so useful, because one of the big secrets about filling an open space without having to do 15 different textures to blend these all together is to use alpha textures. So alpha textures are your friends. You absolutely want to use them. Hey, both of you, I'm glad everyone is here. All right, so simple one, this glacier one, it's an outwash or a sandur. I like to put it in more of my frigid areas. I like to also create some kind of some glaciers that are still remaining, and then I'll put some of that snow there and then apply that last alpha texture. So pretty easy stuff. I'm going to quickly save and we'll move on to the next one, which is a lava field. I might as well do something different than a more grass-like plane. That way we're kind of making it more interesting in between each plane there. We'll let this save. And when it comes to saving, I generally do about 100 changes, or so, and then I save. It just depends on what you're doing. Hey, how's it going, Draco Wolf? First time chatter. Glad that you are here. Things are doing great. We're doing planes, both natural and fantasy, because if you I usually like to start out with the natural biomes first, because when you go to make the fantasy variant of it, at least you have some very crude knowledge about how the natural biome is formed, and then that can play a role in the lore and the overall creation of the more fantasy version of that biome. So let's go to that next one. It's called a lava field. Now we do have a volcano right here, so it only makes sense that we should probably have a lava field next to that. Now, just so you know, the lava field is a bit different. The lava field is generally like it's formed by this accumulation of like layers of lava, but these lava plains can stretch out for miles, and generally those lava flows are cooled and hardened, so you don't have to show like them having actual lava flowing and stuff like that. So you can add that in a fantasy element, but generally the lava field generally doesn't really have a whole lot, though you can. And maybe I'm mistaken on that. So I am an armchair geographer. So if someone knows more about lava fields, feel free to change that for me, because hey, I am not perfect there. So let's do that lava field. And one thing that might be helpful is to first have the area in which we have the mountains and the volcano have actual lava flows, and then we can use that same texture that we use to represent lava. We can desaturate it and make it darker, and then make it look like there's the cooled, hardened variant of it. So what I'll go do, if you go into the catalog and you go into fantasy battle maps, there's a texture called lava, and there's this lava cracks. This stuff works great. As always, whenever you're using a stamp or a texture from a different style, remember that it's going to have a different scale, so you'll probably have to adjust the texture scale. You notice how big it is? It's a fantasy battle map texture, right? So we'll want to scale it down quite a bit to make it nice and small to kind of fit here. I'd say what about there, looks good. Okay, and then I'm going to apply it on the FG layer. Let's see here. Oop, I don't know where my mouse went. Oop, my mouse is disappearing for some reason. There we go. There we go. All right. Okay, so I'm going to apply that texture. Let's go with 100% so you can kind of see it. And what I'm going to try not to do is not to put it on too many of the mountains except for the actual volcano itself. I don't mind having lava coming from there. And then now that I've added lava there, I can take that same texture. I can go into these color adjustments. It's that little hamburger menu right there with the little slider bars. I'm just going to desaturate it. That means taking the saturation all the way to 0. And I'm going to bring the brightness down a little bit so it's not super shiny. And then I can go in and then apply that same texture right here to kind of create that lava plane. There we go. Perfect. That looks good. And of course, you can always, it's always nice to take a light source and you can put them on top of that lava cracks to give it that extra sense of glow. I'll just throw that in there so you can kind of see what that looks like. Let me see if this is the right light source. We want to go to the color adjustments here and change. Let's see here. I think this is fine. Let's use this one. And go to advanced settings. We're going to change that hue back to regular yellow. There we go. That looks good. Let's bring the opacity down, bring it up, and then I'll go ahead and place this light source just right on top of where the lava flow is, like this. And it's going to add a nice extra element of kind of lava flow. It always looks kind of nice. There we go. Light sources play a huge role in making something more dynamic, right? So adding light sources is very helpful. So we finished that lava field. I'll go ahead and delete that. You can throw on some other textures as you want, but I think that cracked ground is just fine. Okay, let's take a step back. 53 changes. We'll just go on right on to the next one. And that one is going to be a lacustrine. So now the thing about the lacustrine plains is that they're formed in areas that were generally like previously occupied by lakes. So when a lake drains out, due to like evaporation and that kind of stuff, that sediment remains behind and it kind of creates a lake bed, a dried up lake bed, and it forms a plain. So one nice thing to do with the lacustrine is to maybe just use a texture to represent dried up riverbeds, or I'm sorry, lake beds. And so what I'll do is I already have a series of lakes and kind of rivers that are already right here. And so it's a nice location to maybe add a lacustrine one. It should match in with the already existing lakes that are not drained. So we'll go ahead and remove the title and we'll add this. And what I'll do is I'll just choose a texture. Let me go back into the Parchment world style here. And there's a cool little trick. If you want to use a texture that you already used on this map, and I've showed this before in previous streams, but you can go to this tag right here and it's called used in this map. And now every single texture that I used will now pop up here. So very helpful. Oh, by the way, hi, first time chatter. Glad that you are here, by the way. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take an already existing texture, like maybe this brown right here. I'm going to apply it to the BG just to see what it looks like. I think that color looks fine. I'm going to bring the texture size way down. I'm going to zoom in. And I'm going to create these dried up lakes. I'm going to create maybe one right here, like this. We'll add maybe another one right here. And we're just going to paint in. It's another first time chatter. Hey, Mega X, glad that you're here. Okay, let's just keep adding this. Oh, we'll be adding in stamps in a little bit, unless I misunderstood the question. Adding more stamps. Another first time chatter. Awesome. Glad. Wow, so many first chatters here. Love it. I'm going to quickly paint in all of these. I might have misunderstood the question, Mega X. My apologies. We mean like when are we releasing the 2.0 stuff? We don't have an exact release date. Somewhere, I think. Hopefully this summer is what we're hoping for. Or are you saying just when are we going to add stamps to this map? And we'll do that probably in the next stream. Hope I understood the questions. Let's add a couple larger ones. Right now we have some really all relatively the same size. Let's just add a much larger one. Okay, there we go. Much, much larger. They're kind of making these kidney bean shapes, but you can have a lake can be all various sizes and shapes. So let me just try to make ones that aren't all this kind of kidney bean shape. So that way it looks more interesting. And what I'll also do is I'll have variations. Like maybe I want to show that the bed is not quite as dried up as other ones. I can simply bring the opacity down and then create another variation of these lakes. And then perhaps this one is not quite as evaporated as the other one. So I can kind of add in the lower opacity. And you see there's quite a few lakes in this area. So very, very nice. When are we going to add 2.0? Hopefully sometime this summer, though we don't know quite yet. We recognize that we hyped it up a little too early, but we just don't want to release it until it's like fully ready. You know, anything bugs and stuff like that. We totally understand frustration people have. I feel that we hyped it up a little too early. I totally understand that frustration. Absolutely understand that sentiment. But we are where we are, and we are hoping to do it sometime this summer. So fingers crossed, because I'm super excited for it too. There's so many wonderful things that are coming with the 2.0 launch. I don't want to hype it up too much since we've been hyping it so much already, but I'm excited for it, and I'm as anxious and excited as you all as well. I totally understand the sentiment. I cannot be upset with anyone for having this feeling of why is it taking so long. I totally get that, okay? So totally reasonable. Let's also go ahead and take a step back here, and then what we're also going to do is we're going to add a grass texture to it, right? So we'll go back into here and we'll add that grass texture. And what I'll do is I'll put it maybe, oh, see, that is cracked ground, my mistake. I believe this is the right one, my mistake. There we go. And then I'm just going to apply the grass. It doesn't have to be directly on top of the lake bed. If you want to show that the lake bed is completely dried up, then maybe apply some of that grass texture right on top of that bed as well. That's fine. So I'll just go ahead and kind of add a little bit of grass in here. I cannot stress to you how important grass, the alpha grass texture is. If you wanted to add a little bit more color to the map, you could also apply like a green texture, especially near bodies of water. Life really flourishes. So I'll go ahead and take a green texture like this and kind of apply it to the, let me go up a layer here. Apply this green texture all along where that river is, and I'll kind of apply it a little bit here as well, and that will kind of give it a little bit of extra green. And then of course I can go back over it with the alpha texture there. There we go. So that way it doesn't all look exactly the same. Add some differences to it. There we go. I think that looks good. Let's go and take a step back and just see what it looks like. I like that. Great one. I had mentioned earlier why artistically a plane is so important. It's because of the negative space. So if I take a step back from the map, you'll notice that when I, real quickly, just to define my terms so you're not confused, when I say negative space, I mean a space that doesn't have a lot of stamps. For instance, right here, this alluvial spot right here, there, notice how there's just no stamps in this spot. That is what I mean by negative space. What makes a plane so nice is that if you want like a point of interest, like maybe a city or maybe some kind of building or a structure, stuff like that, it really, really pops out in a plane. So like this, consider this stamp right here. See how this stamp pops out because there's a negative space around it? There's not a lot of stamps to contrast against it. So, or that kind of removes that contrast. So planes are super important visually because you can do some really cool points of interest and locations inside of the plane that's going to contrast against the negative space, and it's really going to make that pop out. So artistically, a plane is also super cool. Use a plane to your advantage to throw in maybe a world tree, maybe throw in a large capital city, maybe you want to put some interesting smaller biome inside of a plain biome. That biome will really pop out because of that negative space surrounding it. So artistically, a plane is super cool for when you want to add these points of interest that really, really pop out. So super important. Okay, so let's go on to the next one. It's called a scroll plane. Yes, and they also help to make the surrounding biomes pop out too. Absolutely, Tang Whistle. Absolutely, 100%. So glad you said that. Negative space helps to make the positive space pop out. It's a very common concept in art, contrasts. One thing contrasts against another, causing it to pop out. We talked about that with shadows, with depth. It's the same concept as well with your biomes, right? A negative spaced biome is going to help to contrast against a biome that has a lot of positive space, meaning a lot of stamps, a lot of textures and stuff like that. So super important. That's why I really, really like those. So let's go into that next one. Let me check for time. Plenty of time. We've already done so many. This is great. Let's go to a scroll plane. So these scroll planes are formed in areas where there's like a lot of river that meanders. And so these are going to also have a lot of oxbow lakes. If you're not familiar with what an oxbow lake is, an oxbow lake is generally formed when a meander to a river is cut off, that the meander changes over time. That's what happens with rivers. As they meander, the flow around each bend moves and shifts the river around. And so a oxbow lake is going to be like the arm or the meander that gets cut off, but water, standing water, still remains. And so what's going to mark a scroll, what's going to find a good location for a scroll plane, is going to have lots of rivers, and it's going to have oxbow lakes. So if you have a section with a lot of rivers, it's a good place to put in some oxbow lakes and then throw in your scroll plane. And this is pretty easy to put together. I'm going to use the subtract mode of the mask tool. That's what I use to create these rivers right here. So I'm going to want to use the subtract mode of the mask tool. I'm not going to use an edgy brush because the edgy brush, they don't get small enough to work at this scale. So I don't recommend using the edgy brush when making bodies of water. And I'll just give you an example just to show it to you. Even at the smallest size, if I take the roughness all the way to 3 and I turn that smooth off, and I go to subtract at the smallest brush size, you're going to see that it makes it very, very difficult to create these rivers, right? Even if I turn that smooth on, you'll notice that it doesn't give me a lot to work with there, especially when you're making a river, by the way. I generally recommend either using the smallest circle brush. That also depends on what your hold on a second, sorry, 1 second, your mask settings are. So these right here, your mask tool, these settings right here. So if your mask effects are really thick, like if I turn them off, you can see the mask effects are off. If you have like a really thick outline, you'll notice that the river kind of loses that blue color from the BG layer. So it's kind of important that you kind of factor that stuff in when you're making your rivers and bodies of waters and stuff. But for this, I'm going to use the circle brush at the smallest setting. I could even use it at 2. And I'll go ahead and make some oxbow lakes first. And they generally kind of look like this. So you have like one like this. I can put another one right here like that. I can put another oxbow lake right here. I can put another one right there. And I'm going to create these series of oxbow lakes. Okay, let's put one over here maybe. I don't want to do it too much. And then I maybe want to consider adding a couple more rivers as well. Like maybe I want one to branch to create a river delta right here. So that might not be a bad idea. Let's go this way. And then again, as you're doing those rivers, don't forget to add in those meanders. Don't forget to definitely check out the episode on making rivers, okay? So I'm going to add a couple more river features in here, some tributaries that kind of branch off and don't go anywhere. Okay, let's go this one right here. There we go. Okay, now that I've done that, I can just follow that very simple rule that I kind of follow, right? I want to pick a grass texture of some kind. I'm going to go ahead and place it down on top like this. There you go. So I have this nice plane here. And then, of course, I can go in and then add in that alpha texture. And then I have that nice grass plane there. And you can add other elements to it too. Like if you wanted to, you could change, you could add in different colors and different alpha textures, cracks, things like that. But this is generally a good start. So going like this, let me take a step back and just take a look at how it looks. Yeah, I like that. It matches well too with this forest biome, this kind of forest biome right here. I kind of like that. So it looks kind of good. Looks okay. Let's go ahead and save, and we'll go and move on to the next couple ones. And then we'll go into the fantasy ones. 24 minutes in. Cool. We're doing good for time. Awesome. Let this finish save. And then we'll go to that next one. I think we'll cover both floodplain and alluvial. So basically, an alluvial plain is much larger, like it's vast. And then your floodplains are generally smaller plains within an alluvial plain, basically. And alluvial plains are massive, so they're going to take up a lot of space, and they are formed by depositing of sediments called like alluvium, and they include a lot of the footplains like I mentioned, and they're not too hard to make, just like the other ones. What we should do is, since they're considered a part, the floodplains, there generally is bodies of water like rivers and lakes within that plain, and then those bodies of water flood due to continuous rainfall, and then it floods. So what we want to do is we're probably going to want to create some kind of river and maybe a lake in this plain area for it to make at least a little bit of sense. So we'll maybe have a river come out of this right here, and then we'll have it meander this way. And we'll have it maybe be really big. We'll have it go all the way over to here like this. And then I'll kind of have it branch out with some tributaries. So that way there's a lots of water here. So when it does rain, it will flood. And then we can also put in maybe like a series of like lakes if we want to. Put a couple lakes in here. Go with this size right there. And then I can go and just fill that in. You're going to see that water plays a massive role just in general when it comes to plains. So unless it's like a lava plain or whatever, I mean, I'm sure they play a role as well. I don't actually know all the geography behind it. If people do know, please let me know. I am, again, an armchair a geographer, and there are probably people who are far more knowledgeable, and I just don't want to say something that's untrue. So please correct me if I'm wrong there. Let's create a series of lakes here. I think that looks nice. Put one over here, right here, and then maybe we can have this one kind of branch off into another lake. Another one over here into another lake. This, and then let's put just maybe a couple small ones here, here, and then maybe we'll create some just kind of go inward like this, just to kind of give that coastline a little bit more unique shape to it. There we go. Put them here in the mouths. Good section here. There we go. And then I'll create just a couple little series of lakes like this. There we go. Okay. And then let's make a couple more rivers, actually. And we'll have it connect over to here. There we go. Great. This one here, here. Great. Now there's enough bodies of water here, so when it does rain, it will flood. And we're going to try to do something a bit different here. Let's use a different texture for that. Let's maybe go with removed used on this map, and we'll kind of go over our texture options here. There's only so many greens that you can kind of choose from. I feel also that you can use fantasy world textures as well. I think it's all right to use that. So let's go into Fantasy World and we'll open up some options here. There are some textures that I rather like from Fantasy World because they have some of the extra artifacts in it. By artifacts, I mean there's like little changes in the texture, different colors, there's a variety, and I think that's going to work really well here. So I'll just apply that right in here like this. I'm going to go ahead and remove the that as well. Right now I am using a mouse. But you can clearly use a pen as well. What I'm doing is just these very simple single clicks. And then as always, when you're painting, the trick, well, at least for me, is that when I'm doing my texturing, I drop the opacity down to a lower opacity. And then I'll start adding multiple strokes so that way there's a nice transition between the base texture that I'm painting on top of with the current texture. And I'm going to apply that texture at its most opacity at 100% wherever there are bodies of water. Again, wherever there is water, there is life. So I really want to show that that green texture that I'm using is really, really popping out by the sources of water, as you would kind of expect, right? And then plains aren't just flat and have nothing on them but grass. You can have pockets of trees and things like that. And so what I should do is I should add in a couple trees in there as well. I'll go back to Parchment World here. And then we'll type in tree. And we'll pick a couple. Let's use this one right here. And I'm just going to take these trees. I'll make sure my scale is right. So I'll just scale the tree up against here. And what I'll do is I'll put the trees, because the most access to water, and because it's a floodplain or alluvial plain that has floodplains in it, because there's a lot of water, there's also a lot of life. So you can have a variety of plant life, especially over this large expanse. So what I might want to consider doing is maybe having some forest areas that are inside of here, like adding a couple of these. What I'll do is I'll create a larger forested area first with a canopy, and then create some smaller variations of woods around like this, and then single click like this. Now that I've kind of used that, now I can go switch over to another tree. let's go use maybe this pine tree right here. And then what I'll do is I'll go over to this side and have the pine trees kind of just be transitioning up into this area right here. And then I can also just randomly place some down here as well to really give that biodiversity, right? It's a floodplain, alluvial. So there's going to be a lot of vegetation and a lot of life because of all that access to water. So let's keep adding different variations of trees as well. Like maybe we want to add this shaded pine. Let's go ahead and move the shaded pine into the more southern part as it kind of moves down into this plane. And then let's even add some larger kind of forested kind of areas. Let's actually not to have too much next to this kind of salt plain right there. That's where you would expect life not to be. So I'll go ahead and throw a couple of these here, throw some in here. There we go. And then finally, of course, I'll go ahead and throw in that alpha texture. And I don't want to accidentally paint the trees because the trees have a clipping mask. And so I can paint the grass on top of that. I don't want to do that. So I'll just go ahead and paint it in the negative space. That means where there's no stamps, right? And if I just go ahead and in here and just start painting in those negative spaces. There we go, looking good. I like it. Let's go ahead and throw in some more grass in here, here, all along in here, up in here. Really get that grass. There we go. And I'm going to put some really dense grass the further you go into this fey area, and I really want to show there's a lot of vegetation there. So I'm going to put a lot of this alpha grass texture right before that fey area, and I'll kind of have it fade off into here. There we go. As you can see, texturing creates a lot of changes. So we'll quickly save it. Oh, hey, first time channel, General Chipmunk. Glad that you're here, by the way. We'll quickly save, and then we'll go on to, I think we've covered all of the natural ones. That's perfect timing. We're halfway through the stream, and we can kind of go into the fantasy elements. Let me check to see if there's any I missed. Oh, we did want to put a floodplain in here. So one thing I forgot to mention about floodplains is that they're generally located in a valley, by the way. So let me kind of just go over exactly how these kind of floodplains kind of operate. And basically, a floodplain refers to a plain that kind of stretches between the banks of some river or stream, and then it goes up against the enclosement of like the valley walls. If you're not sure what a valley is a location in between two mountain ranges. I live in the Willamette Valley. It's in between two mountain ranges, the Cascades and the Coastal Range. So a floodplain is specific to a valley. So you're going to want to make sure that you do have a valley available on your world map. They're not complex. Again, it's just in between two mountain ranges. So a floodplain would be right here where this valley is right here. And we're going to follow that exact same logic that we did before. We're just going to apply some grass texture right into here like this. I'm going to go ahead and just paint in right here some of that green texture and then just apply that. So just a kind of a gentle reminder, because I've kind of put together the alluvial and the floodplain together, but I forgot to mention that floodplains are specific to valleys, if I remember correctly from my reading. If I missed that, please let me know, okay? All right, so I'll go ahead and just add in that grass here. There we go. So this is a floodplain specifically. All right, so let's talk about the various types of planes that you could do with fantasy, right? Like maybe I wanted to make a glade, like some kind of plane that's not normal, right? That's different from like a regular grass or lava plane or whatever. And so I do have this kind of fantasy point of interest right here with this kind of pink tower, with that summoning circle. And I kind of feel like because that's a fantastical element, the area surrounding it should also be some kind of fantastical element. Hey, first time chatter, by the way, Mossy Vagabond, glad that you are here. And we're really happy that you're enjoying the tool. I'll pass that on to the team, by the way. So because I have this fantasy geography right here, I want to continue carrying on that fantasy geography. One thing I noticed is that I added this lava texture right here. Maybe we should have that same texture being in the surrounded area, right? So that wouldn't be too hard to put together. We just need to find that lava texture again. That's not too hard, right? We can go into here if we want to, or we can go into here, and try to find it. There's all kinds of options. I found that lava texture there. Let's go into color adjustments and change the hue to make it that pink color. I think that looks good. And then I'll bring that opacity down so that I can make it look like it's fading the further away I get from the point of this kind of fantasy element right here. So I'll bring the opacity down to around, let's say 30, and then I'll start applying that texture. I'm going to apply heavy amounts of it the closest to this point of interest right here. But the farther that I get away from it, the more it kind of fades away. Okay, you see that it kind of fades a little bit the farther we get away from it. So I want to really, really apply that texture right into here like that. That looks good. And then I'm going to want to maybe throw in some interesting elements in there. Like I could throw in some jagged rocks. I could throw in like a mesa, maybe some maybe some kind of fantasy dune can go in there. All kinds of interesting things can be thrown in there. Or if you don't want to add in a stamp, you can just keep using textures. Just kind of a pro tip here. If you don't want to add a whole bunch of stamps, for instance, let's say you're in this scenario where you have so many stamps, like 10K stamps on your map, and you're adding more and more stamps, it's just creating some kind of lag, even at 2K. A great way to go around that is to only use alpha textures to make it easier. Oh, another first-time chatter. Wow, lots of first-time chatters here. Love to see all these people. I'm glad that I'm making a change. Also, that first-time chatter, Massy Vagabond, I really want to see what your map is. You should totally share it in our Discord server. And if you haven't, join it. Other first-time chatter, thank you. That means a lot to me. I appreciate it. I love doing these streams for y'all. It's a lot of fun, and I love passing on what information I know about that tool. So as I was kind of saying, if you don't want to apply more stamps, you can use textures, particularly alpha textures. So I want to go to Fantasy Battle Maps, and there's this nice texture called Fey Light, and maybe I want to add some of this pink Fey Light, or maybe I want to use a different color. Green goes well, I think, with pink, with pink. And so if I like apply some of this greenish like texture here, I can go ahead, let's go ahead and bring the scale down, my bad, there we go. And let me just apply this kind of green sparkly texture here to kind of create this fantasy like fantasy-like setting between these pink kind of cracks on the ground and then this complementary green that goes with pink, and then it kind of gives it this kind of fantasy element to it. And then when I'm thinking about the lore, it could be very simple, that geological element right there with that summoning circle, there is this magic that's kind of spreading and emanating from it. And then maybe that green could maybe represent like your players, anyone who tries to go to that tower and they come into that green sparkling like light or fog or whatever you want to call it, it puts them to sleep. And so they can't actually get to the tower. They'll just keep falling asleep. And the closer and closer they get to the tower, to that tower or that geological formation right there, the more and more potent that magic becomes. And so that will kind of explain that plane right there. Explain. Dad joke. Let's go ahead and save it, and we'll keep working on a couple more fantasy ones. Also, if you, I don't know about you, but I love coming up with lore, and if we're working on a biome and you have some lore, feel free to share that here in the chat or share that to me personally in our Discord server. Okay, I don't mind. I know that many of you are super creative. If you have ideas, feel free to share them. I don't mind. Okay, let's do another fantasy plane here. Let's go ahead and find a good location for one. I see that there's this really nice kind of valley right here. It's kind of enclosed, and so we might want to make an interesting kind of fantasy plane here. And we'll have to come up with some interesting ideas, like something fun and interesting. Oh, hey, another first-time chatter. Man, so many first-time chatters today. So glad that you are here, Fleet Admiral. Love the name, too. Awesome. I love seeing all these new people. It's great. So glad that you're speaking up. I was nervous that this particular series was getting boring because we had gone already so many. Yeah, first-time army, indeed. Woo! I like it. Okay, so let's go into the catalog here, and not fantasy. Let's go into Parchment World. I do recognize that Parchment World is kind of lacking. So I definitely hope that we in the future will do a lot more. But let's go ahead and create a different type of plane, maybe one with craters and stuff where most of it is flat, but there's some craters inside of it. And I want to come up with some fantasy elements that have to do with it. So, oh yeah, anyone has any first time chatters that have a map, I totally would direct you to our Discord server. If you're looking for feedback, we have a feedback channel for that. Or if you just want to show it off, you can add that to the map gallery. Our mentors are really, really helpful. And of course, you can always ping me as well. I'm always glad to help. So let's go ahead and add some craters in here. I think it will still be defined as a plane because there's no major changes in elevation. Remember the definition of a plane. It's not going to have these wide variations in elevation, right? It's relatively flat. And so this can still classify as a plane. But I want to add some different elements to the plane. For instance, adding in maybe some craters. And a crater is great, right? You can add things to a crater. You could add a geological formation inside of the crater. You can have geological formations being around the crater. So all these different things that you can do. What I want to do is, as I mentioned before, is because I have all this negative space, I should make the crater much larger. And this will be the focal point of the plane. And then I'll also put some variations of other craters around it. And for instance, we can have the lore be that this plane was just a peaceful plane, and maybe there were mountains here, and maybe these comets that fell, maybe some of them broke off. That's why you have multiple craters here. A larger one broke off, and then when those parts landed, it created these craters, and it maybe formed this valley right here. Perhaps there was some mountains or more elevation in this area, and those impacts from that comet pretty much leveled that entire area, carving out kind of a valley in this mountain area. And maybe we want to add in some fantasy elements, like maybe there's a ship or something that kind of crashed there. Maybe we want to create some kind of maybe a magical comet or something that landed there. There's all these different options that we can kind of choose from here. So what we'll do is I'm going to go ahead and just use I'm going to create my own, use art. I'm going to go ahead and create my own type of comet. So I'll create a circle first like this. This is going to represent the crater there, represent the comet. It's two perfectly circle. You would expect some of the comet kind of crashing and breaking and being in different sizes. So what I'll end up doing is I'll go in with a circle brush, make sure that merge, and then I'll go over to brush like this. The brush is massive. I'll bring the size down. And what I'll do is I'll just go add like this, and I'm going to change the size to make it to where it's not this perfectly flat. It's not this perfectly circular one. So I'll go in like this and just add just some very tiny little elements like this. Oopsie, I think I made a mistake there. And in fact, if you bump into a problem like this, what I will do is I'll scale it up to make it much larger, and it will make it much easier for me to now deal with it. So I can go in like this now with a little more ease. There we go. This, there we go, like that. Let's add another one like right here, like this. And then I'll go to subtract. And I'm going to go ahead and make it look like it's kind of flat like this. There we go. So there's my kind of comet right there. And then what I'll also do is I might want to end up not using a clipping mask for the fill. Instead, I'll use a different texture. So I can go into here and choose maybe this kind of grayish color to represent the comet. And then maybe I want to change the color to be more of this kind of darker, kind of black-like color. I'll bring the scale down like this. And then I can go ahead and place this. And what I'll also do is I want to make it look more spherical. So I'll take some of these craters and kind of put it on top of this one. I'm going to turn the clip masks off on these. I don't need the clip mask. I'm going to go ahead and just copy and paste, put it on top of there. I'm going to change that blend mode to like maybe darken or maybe color burn. There we go. And get that more black color. Copy and paste another one so I can get this, another part of it, like this sense of curvature. There we go, like that. There we go. And then I can just go ahead and just create group, call it a meteor or comet or whatever it's called. Maybe I'm getting the words wrong on them. Correct me, please. And then I'll go ahead and place that. Just put it right on top like this, as if it kind of crashed right there on top like that. There we go. That looks good. And we could do all kinds of things like coloring and shading and all that stuff. If we wanted to add more detail to it, we could. And then I'll go ahead and take some cracked ground, because there's been some kind of, because there's been, there's this crater right here. You would expect some of the surrounding ground around it to be broken up a little bit. So I'll take this cracked ground texture and I'm going to do some changes to it, because right now it's, if I apply it, you'll notice that it's a white color because it's like cracked ice. I don't want it to be that color. So I'm going to go over to my color adjustments and bring the brightness all the way down to black. And then all I have to do now is just go around the rim of the crater itself like this. Oopsie, let's go make it a little bit bigger. And then just apply this cracked round texture around like this. And then just kind of have it fade away like this. So now we have some cracked round right there, like this. And of course, you can also add grass to it. First, what I should have done is added a texture instead of before adding the alpha textures. You should generally add a solid texture first before you add alpha textures. My mistake there, but hey, I'm glad that I'm showing you making mistakes, because I make them all the time, by the way. I'm going to make them consistently, and that's okay. There's just no getting around it, right? There's always going to be mistakes one way or another. I'm going to go ahead and use a different type. I'm going to use the Fantasy World. Again, I kind of like the Fantasy World textures because it has a lot of those artifacts and the textures. You kind of notice that there's not nearly as much artifacts as the other one. So let's go ahead and add this texture here. I'm going to bring the opacity down. Let's make it nice and small. I'm going to use a use my regular mouse. I'm not going to use the pen, because most of you are probably using a mouse and not a pen. So I'm going to try to primarily use mostly a pen here for that, or mostly a mouse. Now you're like, whoa, what's going on here? Happy little accidents. That's exactly right. Pickle Sharky, 100%. Or is it Pickles Harky? I don't know. All right, so we've added in that there. And of course, I'll go back to that cracked texture, my mistake. Of course, again, apply your flat texture first, the ones that don't have alpha, and then you can go in and throw the alpha textures. It's kind of important just to kind of remember that, my mistake. And then we'll go ahead and throw in that grass texture. Just kind of throw that in there. Let's go with full opacity. There we go. And then I can kind of throw in that grass. There we go. You have that nice grass texture there. And what I might want to also do is take a light source, and just to kind of show that maybe there's like an eerie activity like still going on emanating from the comet, I'll go ahead and I'll just change the blend mode to make it look something different. And sometimes I just scroll through, or not scroll, but I'll go through all the various blend modes to see kind of which one looks the most interesting, because the blend modes are going to interact with the textures and stamps beneath it. So that's why I put it layer +5. And then I can kind of go through and just see, and I kind of like this kind of difference right here. It kind of creates the line work to glow a little bit. I might want to consider maybe just bringing the opacity down just a little bit. And then what I can also do is just take, again, this time with a normal overlay, and just kind of place it right there like that. And then you have this nice, and then again, what I can do is I can maybe choose maybe a fey color that will work with it. So a couple options here. I could go back into Fantasy Battle Maps and go to Fey. And then this time we'll do a reverse. Up here we had pink cracks and green lights. Let's do the reverse. just for fun, right? We'll go ahead and take this pink kind of texture right here. I'll bring the scale down, make it nice and small, and I'll just kind of place it around like this. Just like that. And now I have this nice, crazy kind of eerie-like effect going on. So there's this nice crater, there's an asteroid, comet, whatever it might be, and I'll quickly save it at 246 changes. Where are we at for time? Looks like we're not going to get to every single plane, but we'll do one more fantasy one, and then we'll call it good. So we'll let this save, and we'll move on to one more. Oh, another first-time chatter. Hey, Magnus, glad that you're here. I'm glad that you like the map. If you miss any of the stream, you can rewatch it over on our Twitch. We also upload every single VOD to our YouTube channel, and I also cut them up into clips. That usually takes a couple days before I add them. I don't want to add like 5 clips in one day. I don't want to get people turned off by too much updates or too many notifications. So we'll generally add like maybe 3 clips in a day or spread them out over a couple of days. So if you don't have the time to watch the full VOD on Twitch or YouTube, no problem at all. We cut them up into clips. So just be patient because it takes a little while to cut them up. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and add that one more fantasy plane. Let me see the ones that I missed. Ooh, we missed one here, only about 3 or 4 locations. Not a big deal whatsoever. Oh, vultures would be amazing. Yes, love that idea, by the way. So let's go ahead and add in one more fantasy plane, and let's use the one that's got the most negative space. Again, negative space meaning nothing going on, no stamps. So we'll just go ahead and add one more right here. And one thing we could do is maybe we want to have a plane with like maybe some crystals or like a crystal plane of some kind. Now we don't have crystals for the Parchment world. So if I go back into Parchment World real quick and kind of go you through it, we do not have that. So you'll see there aren't any crystals in here. You could use a variety of these jagged rocks right here, and you could change the object shadow to make them blue if you want to stay within the style. But you don't have to do that. You can also use Fantasy World stuff as well. I don't think that's a problem. For instance, you'll see that there are these nice crystals right here. These work just fine in such a small scale. I don't think they're going to conflict too much with the I don't think they're going to conflict too much with the Parchment World stamps. I don't think it's that too big of a deal. So first we want to pick the crystals that we want. We've got a couple here, these green ones. We have these yellow crystals here, and then you have the more flat front-facing options, and these ones are the more isometric. I think in this instance, it doesn't really matter which one you use. You could use either one. It's not a big deal. Though I do want to use a different color. I've been using green a lot. You notice that I use green Fey lights here, and then I used green lights itself, like a great light stamp here. So I'm kind of using a lot of the similar color schemes. Let's try to break away from that and then maybe add in maybe a different color kind of fantasy. So what I'll do is I'll create some crystals, large clusters. So I'll make some large ones first, like this. I don't want to make them too equidistant from each other. That means being exactly the same distance from each other. That looks really odd. So make sure that you have some that are maybe close to each other, midway away from each other, and then further away from each other. It's a way to kind of make it look more natural as well. Once you've done the large stamps, oopsie, I've noticed also these are at layer 5. Let's go ahead and select all these from the set, and then we'll bring them down. There we go, like that. My mistake. Probably shouldn't have done that, so we'll go ahead and fix that problem. Okay, we'll go back over here. Also, I'm going to select every single one of these and bring the opacity up. Now, what I'll also do is I can change the color hue at any time, but let's go ahead and finish adding them. So now that I've done the big ones, let's add medium-sized ones. So kind of place them around like this. Put a couple clustered next to each other, one here, here, here. Let me just take a step back so I can get a better view of it. I think that looks good. One there, and then maybe one more right there. And then from there, you'll do the smallest size. So put some of these smaller ones. Don't forget to add like clusters, what I call a rule of 3. I'll usually put 3 of them to make it like a kit look like that. You can add even more than 3. You could add like 5 or 6, but generally I kind of do it like that. That way you have a much more natural feel to it. So this is a large crystal like plane there. Now that I've done that, I kind of like the color, that orangish color, so I want to put like maybe a complementary color to that. So maybe I want to use like maybe a yellow beige desert color. There's also this rock garden right here. This is a nice texture from Fantasy World. I can bring the scale down. You can see that it has like this kind of crop circle design in it. I think that would look really cool here, but I don't want to use that brownish color. Instead, I might want to go to color adjustments and maybe change the hue to a more yellowish color if I can find it. Sometimes it's hard to find yellows depending what the color, the original color of the texture is. So what I'll end up doing is boosting the saturation up, and that will help you to kind of figure out the color. And you'll already notice that it has that yellowish color. So I'll bring that saturation kind of back down. And then what I'll do is I'll bring the opacity down a little bit, and then I'll just apply that nice curve, that nice texture right in here like that with that nice right there. And what I might want to consider doing is putting some of the crystals in the center of those circular like textures. So right here, I might want to put a crystal right there in the center of that one. That'd be a nice idea. Put a crystal in the center of that one. This one's already lined up nicely. Let's put a smaller one in the center of this circle like that. We'll move maybe this one here. There's another circle right there. Let's move this one to the center of this one. This one over to here. This one right here, here. Very cool. All right, there. There we go. Looks nice. There we go. Just want to make sure that we kind of, that way we have a focal point, right? Those circles are creating a frame around those crystals. Slug Nuster, my secret is to follow a method. That's the secret. If you, it's not just an intimate knowledge of the tool, knowing the stamp that you want to use. That plays a crucial role in doing things quickly, but also having a method. So like, let's say an order of operation. I'll start, like great example was what I just did. I started with a larger crystal first, a medium-sized one, and then a small one. And then I added those around. Now I even backtracked a little bit. I had to move some of those crystals because I added a texture later. I should have added that texture first, and then it would have sped up the process by adding the crystals on top. But having a method, an order of operation is really the trick. If you follow a method, and methods are meant to be broken a little bit, you don't always have to follow the method from A to Z. You can go from A to C and then go back to B again. That's up to you, right? But method is the secret to going faster. If you have a method, the other secret besides the intimate knowledge of the tool and method is to plan your things out first. I planned out these ideas in my head, a lot of them, not all of them. I didn't plan this one out in advance, as you can see, because I added the stamps instead of the textures first. So I created some backtrack. But if you already have a plan in your head on what you're creating, that will shave off all of that time that you're thinking in the process of making the map. So before, I'll generally come up mapping in my mind some ideas first before application of the stamps and textures, and that will also speed up the process. So pre-planning, a knowledge of the tool, as well as following a method, are really, for me, the three ingredients in which I am able to accomplish making maps so quickly. That's my secret, okay? All right, well, the last thing that I might want to consider adding here is maybe adding in some light sources. Instead of adding a stamp, what I'll do is I'll just add every single one of, I'm going to go ahead and take every single one of these crystals, select all from this set here, select all from this set. Oopsie, did I have some crystals over here somewhere? Let's see here, where are those crystals at? Oh, they're right there. Okay, let's go ahead and just select these ones specifically here. Like that. There we go. Okay, let me select all of those. And then I'll go over to your shadow. So I select all those crystals, go to shadow, go to custom object shadow. And then I'm going to choose a color that I want those to be, like maybe a yellowish color or maybe that orange color. I'm going to bring the blur down like that. Bring the intensity up so you can kind of see that yellowish color. Let's maybe bring the blur out a little bit more like that. And then I'll bring the offset up a little bit, like this. And you can also just experiment with which different colors you want to work with. Maybe I want to work with a pink color. Maybe I want to work with a green color. The crystal doesn't have to emanate the exact color, right? It's fantasy, so you can change it to whatever you want. Pink, purple, maybe I want a bluish light color. Maybe I like a gray color. Maybe I like it to be black. So you can play around with it. It doesn't have to be the exact color of the crystal, right? That's up to you. And you can always change the color of the crystal to match. But that object shadow is going to be helpful. So this way I don't have to add all of these light sources onto it. Let's go with that color right there. I think that looks fine. Though blue is a complementary color to yellow, so it's not a bad idea to throw blue in as well. Up to you, right? So that's a decision that you need to make there. All right. So we got a lot of stuff done in this episode. We'll be doing, where are we at for time? Perfect. It is already perfect. So what we'll do is I'll do some planes off screen. I hope you don't mind that, because basically I'm just going to do the same techniques I showed you in this stream. So I apologize if I do the rest of those planes off screen. It's going to be this one right here, this one, this one, and this one. And I'm just going to make just some wild fantasy ones. So nothing special, or I'll just make them regular planes, which is grass textures. So don't worry, we'll miss that off screen. The next episode is actually going to be focused on points of interest and what kinds of points of interest where to place them, like what kind of points of interest would I put in a desert, what kind of points of interest would I put on a floating island, what kind of points of interest would I put in a saltpeter plain or desert, right? So we're going to go over all of that in the next episode, part 8. That will be next month. So I'm excited about that. Points of interest are some of my favorite things. We're going to go into lore because lore is going to play a huge role. Because when it comes to lore, I always make the land and the geography first because that's where I derive my inspiration for the lore. I know some people get upset and they're like, well, why aren't you adding lore first? It's like, I don't actually. I feel like it's easier to work with something than to start with nothing. Coming up with the lore first is more difficult for me. It's easier to make the map first and then to use that, all of that precious, beautiful geography, fantasy, natural, and otherwise. Then I can kind of get this rich source that I can now derive my lore from. So if you're wondering why I haven't done lore yet, it's because I like to do it after I make all the stuff. All right, that's it, everybody. Have a great weekend. I'm looking forward to seeing you all next week. Please stay safe and healthy. Stay cool out there. It's been hot. I hope it's been cooling down in your locations. You guys are all awesome. Please stay safe and healthy, and I will see you all next week, okay? Bye, everyone.